What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, here's a topic we don't cover very often. Movies, Oscars, awards night, and of course, culture just slammed right into both of those. So we're going to go to our movie guy, longtime contributor to ordinary-times.com. He has his own Substack, the Mendez Movie Report, that you need to go to subscribe to right now because my man went 21 of 23 on his Oscar predictions. He knows what's going on. I lean on him to explain these things to me like I'm five. We're going to go to him right now from sunny South Florida, our buddy Luis Mendez. How are you, sir? Thanks for some time this morning.
I'm doing great. I've got a lot of energy considering I didn't get much sleep because I spent basically the entire night just listening to a bunch of Oscar reactions and about how nuts last night ended up being.
Yeah, and before we get into the specifics of it, because everybody knows the big ticket item here, you made the comment on Twitter, and you can explain to me because you follow this stuff more than I do. I normally just ignore all awards shows, not just the Oscars. I just don't like award shows. I don't like the Grammys. I don't like anything else. You made this comment, so you explained it to me. You said this is the most discussion by non-movie people over an Oscar ceremony that you've ever seen.
Oh, I mean, it used to be that the Oscars they got ratings that were like the Super Bowl. It really used to be that kind of event. Over the last couple decades and really the last couple years, the viewership's just been going down. There hasn't been much interest. There's been more and more of a disconnect on what people are watching compared to what the Oscars want to award. And as someone who just enjoys I have a very eclectic taste in movies. I'm the kind of guy who can enjoy a superhero popcorn flick and an art house film. And I kind of always see that kind of dichotomy and how it clashes with each other on that. A lot of my friends that I talk to that aren't big film people, they do not really follow the Oscars that much because they feel like they haven't seen any of the movies. But what's happening because of what happened last night with Will Smith and Chris Rock is that it's become this big cultural thing where everybody at the water cooler is talking about the fact that a millionaire decided to get up and swing at another millionaire in the middle of the Super Bowl for award shows. And that's kind of, it's led to this thing where the Academy is seeing the most interest that I have seen on a post-Oscar morning, probably since maybe Lord of the Rings won Best Picture, and it's not for the reasons that they want it to be.
Yeah, let's do some background real quick, though, because I know with Will Smith, him and his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, they've been really, really public about some very, very private things in their relationship over, I guess, especially the last year or so. They've been really open. Of course, she's got the Red Table Talk where she's very open about a lot of issues. They did a big interview about 9-10 months ago that got a whole lot of coverage. So, these things don't happen in a vacuum. They've been very public about their stuff. Their son Jaden's obviously done some movies and stuff. They've discussed some of his things very publicly. These are very high profile people anyway, and they've had their very personal stuff kind of out there for the last year or so in the run up to this. And then the other part of it that you can speak to as a movie person is there's a really interesting path that Will Smith took to getting his Oscar. A lot of the, DiCaprio got his a couple of years ago, and it was one of those like, okay, which movie is he eventually going to get his Oscar? We know the Meryl Streep thing. There's usually a path to these things. And the path for Will Smith was always he avoids the controversial roles, or he would avoid the roles that would normally get you an Oscar. And he got it for this one. Just talk about those two things, because I don't think you can talk about, the emotional explosion without the background of who Will Smith has been for the last year in the tabloids and the last 20 years as a movie star, can you?
No, and the thing is that Will, this is only his third nomination, but it's just felt so overdue because he's arguably been one of our last big movie stars. The dude is a box office grosser. And for a lot of people my age growing up, he was the face of Hollywood for a moment there. But the thing is that I never felt like he was a butt kisser. He didn't really play too much of those political games, but he did try to create this image for himself as the clean family guy who was going to do nice, warm movies. Now, his first nomination was for Ali, which was a serious biopic, but his other nomination was Pursuit of Happiness, which is a very simple biopic, but it's a heartwarming movie, and that's traditionally been the kind of movies that he goes to. He's not the kind of guy you're going to find in a Tarantino movie. He's not that guy. So when the King Richard trailer came out, a lot of us were like, well, this really could be his path to an Oscar. And that's what ended up happening. And throughout this entire campaign, he has been portraying himself as the family man, on top of the overdue narrative, of course. He's going to be the family man who you want to see win, maybe it's not the greatest performance out of the nominees, but he's overdue, and he's such a nice guy. Let's finally give him an Oscar. But in the middle of that, he's been having these little slip-up moments where a lot of his private life is getting out, and people are seeing some stuff that it's kind of weird for a lot of folks. So they're a little judgmental, or they're like, wow, that's some hardcore stuff that I didn't think Will Smith was going through. So I wonder if a lot of that emotion just kind of spilled out last night in the middle of what was going to be his big moment. Because we all know about him and Jada, and supposedly Rock and Jada have a history themselves. And I wonder if that have more to do with it than just this one joke.
Yeah, talking to Luis Mendez, there's two things. Everybody knows what happened. Everybody's seen the viral clip now of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. I do think it was real because Chris Rock would have had a line ready if it was fake. I've watched a lot of Chris Rock over the last 20 years that I've never seen him react like that. I think it was real. I also saw Will Smith. You could see I don't want to psychoanalyze. I really don't, because the man's, he's been very open about his own personal issues, and I've got my personal issues. So I'm not judging him at all. I'm just judging his behavior. That's all I've got to go on. I saw him, laugh at the joke. I saw him look at his wife. I saw his demeanor change. And then I saw what he did like everybody else did. I've got those two pieces of information that tell me that this was a real thing. And then something you highlighted on your Twitter feed that I didn't know, because I didn't watch this. I saw all this later on when I got up to do the radio show. It's got to be in early morning, so I'm usually up middle of the night. There was a moment, Denzel Washington and Tyler Perry, universally recognized as two of the just really good dudes in Hollywood, have him off to the side of the stage. Literally, Denzel's got his arm around him, and Tyler's a huge, people don't realize how big Tyler Perry is. He's just towering over both of them, almost like he's shielding. He's literally standing there like he's shielding them from everybody else. There was that moment off to the side, and that's when it kind of hit me of, okay, there's a lot going on here beyond what's going to be the viral moment that lives forever. And you put it on your Twitter feed, and that's how I saw it. How did that moment strike you?
Well, I mean, I thought it was real from the get-go because something just wasn't right. If you were watching the American feed, they definitely were trying to cover something up. But unfortunately for them, the foreign feeds did not get to cover that up, and that went viral. And then there was the scenes from the journalists that were inside the theater where you could tell that Denzel and Tyler Perry were trying to kind of give him some advice, trying to cool him down. And you're right. You could tell by Chris Rock's reaction. This was not planned. I've never seen Chris Rock that deer in the headlights. And I don't blame. And honestly, I think a lot of people aren't talking about the fact that you could argue that he handled that kind of like a pro.
Dude didn't take a step back either. Let's acknowledge that too. I mean, he leaned. If you ever watch boxing, he did the lean down and pop up, but he didn't take a step back either. So that's pretty tough when you're live on TV, and then he went right back to the bit. That's
yeah. And the thing is, what happens if he has that fight or flight reaction and he decides that he's going to swing back? Then it becomes an even bigger mess for the Academy, and it becomes even more awkward to continue the show. It becomes even more awkward when Will's got to go up there and accept Best Actor. But I think I had heard that this wasn't caught on camera, that even Bradley Cooper went over there to talk to Smith. Like, this was very clearly something that shook up the room. And honestly, watching the show, after that happened, the entire vibe of the show just felt surreal. It just really overshadowed the entire show.
Yeah, talking to Luis Mendez about the Oscars ceremony and what happened. Before we put the Will Smith thing to go to bed and talk about what you really want to talk about, which is the actual movies of the Oscar, where does this go? I don't think they're going to strip the Oscar. They're not going to do something crazy like that. Obviously, the Academy is going to have to do something here, though. But like you said, this was supposed to be, since he was involved here, this was supposed to be like the Denzel Washington moment. Remember him and Sidney Poitier a few years ago, or 20 years ago now with Training Day. We're getting old, man. That was 20 years ago. But they was supposed to be that kind of a moment of a guy really getting his due, and they were going to have this big thing. This is all that's ever going to be remembered. You were joking about it on Twitter. You've already done it in your writing. You're like the Academy Awards where Chris Rock got slapped. I mean, that's what this is always going to be now. What does the Academy do, and what does Will Smith do? Because he's an established star, but his narrative's kind of been a little off the rails over the last year, like we talked about. This is sure not going to help that. Where does he go from there? Where does the Academy go from here? I think Chris Rock will be okay because he's got that mentality. I think he's going to come out of this probably looking the best out of all of them. But where do those two people go?
Well, I mean, Chris is fine because he was the one who was swung at. And I think it's already gotten out that he's not going to do anything dramatic like press charges or anything like that. So I think he's going to be fine. But the Academy, this is one of the last things they needed. They've already got this issue with ratings going down year after year. They've got people who don't. They know that the regular moviegoer is not connecting to the movies they're awarding. The hardcore film fans are mad at them because they don't think that they nominate and give awards to enough highbrow films. And then on top of that, you have this after the debacle that happened last year where they tried to do this big Chadwick Boseman celebration at the end of last year's show, and he didn't end up winning. Then you have this happen with the Best Actor category the year after. The Academy's not happy right now about this stuff. On top of that, regarding what's going to happen to Will, I don't think it's going to be anything dramatic where there's already this talk about, take his statue away or anything like that. But I do think there is a very real possibility that at best, they just ask him not to attend next year's ceremony when traditionally he would be awarding Best Actress next year. But at worst, in terms of plausible outcomes, I can see a situation where maybe they kick him out of the Academy. But even that to me might feel a little extreme because the Academy does have a lot of problematic winners of the past and things that have not really looked well for them. So I don't think it's going to be anything dramatic, but I think there's going to have to be something done where Will just maybe doesn't get to attend. And on top of that, this might affect his career in terms of Oscar caliber roles, or maybe if he does have another Oscar caliber role, because he does have a movie coming up from Apple that may be an Oscar contender where he plays some kind of it's some kind of runaway slave drama. If that ends up being a role that people are like, wow, this is an Oscar caliber role, the Academy members might not nominate him because they don't like the way he reacted last night.
Yeah, Luis Mendez. And we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back more with Luis Mendez. We're going to actually talk about some movies, which I know he's itching to get to do. More with our buddy, moviephile, cinephile, Luis Mendez on Heard Tell right after this. Welcome back to Heard Tell. We're talking about the Oscar fallout. We've talked about the Will Smith thing. Okay, the problematic character and kind of the star going into this Oscars, the big controversy before Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, though, was the Power of the Dog and Jane Campion. She had made some very controversial comments. She picked a fight with Sam Elliott, who everybody that's not an art house picture lover probably loves a whole lot more than her. And then she wins Best Director. That's quite the little saga in about a 3-month period of time, isn't it?
Yeah, and I really do think that controversy may have been one of the perfect recipes that led to Power of the Dog. Really, honestly, the only way to say it is it's choking at the end of the line after it had dominated award season as much as it did. Campion is one of those that if you're a real film person, you've been waiting for her to finally have a Best Director win. But if you're not really much of a film person, she's the kind of person that I remember when she did an interview earlier during the season where she kind of took a shot at superhero movies. And I had a friend of mine who's like, who is this Jane Campion? Who is this? Now, to a lot of film people, that's like, well, who is Jane Campion? How could you say that? That's Jane Campion. Everybody knows Jane Campion, one of the revolutionary female directors. But if you're not a movie person, the only thing you know about Jane Campion is that she's taking shots at superhero movies. She got into a fight with Sam Elliott, and I actually agree with her over Sam Elliott, but it became this thing that really built up during award season where they were asking people from Power of the Dog about the Sam Elliott comments at every red carpet event. And then on top of that, she had that gaffe at the Critics' Choice Awards where it sounded like she was trying to put herself over the Williams sisters. And even though I understood what she was trying to say, that did not play well. And I remember watching that live and thinking, am I the only one that feels like that might not have come off well? And then, of course, the next day it blew up. Now, she still won Best Director because honestly, I think her lead was just so insurmountable at that point. But honestly, and unfortunately, they will never let us see the actual ballot numbers, which I and a lot of others have always found annoying because we would love to see how tight the race was or wasn't. I would not be surprised if it was closer than people thought, and because there seemed to be at the end there a kind of a search for Kenneth Branagh in director because of the comments that were made. And if you read some of these anonymous Oscar ballots, her comments definitely rub people the wrong way.
Is it too simple? Because I watch it. I'm not the cinephile you are, but I do keep up with it. Even if I don't watch a movie, I usually read up on a big movie like Power of the Dog, at least be aware of it. Man, if you were just wanted to go back to what the first thing you ever said about the Oscars in this conversation about there's that disconnect. This Campion thing, if you were going to do a microcosm of it, this is almost like its own little mini movie of all the problems with the Academy, just kind of distilled into one little thing, isn't it? You have this real great art house director that they all love. Nobody else knows who she is. And then she makes public comments that are, let's be generous and just call them tone deaf, although I think there may have been some little more malice there than that. It's that she just kind of embodies the whole disconnected problem that the Academy's got right now, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, and the thing is that if you look at who she was up against, with the exception of Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who Japanese director who just had a movie that completely blew up and became a big awards darling. You had Steven Spielberg. Everyone knows Steven Spielberg. Everybody knows Kenneth Branagh. Branagh's directed genre films. Paul Thomas Anderson. Now, Paul Thomas Anderson, he doesn't direct like genre movies, but he's still a well-known director even among casuals. So to have that director race come down to Campion, if you're not a film person, all you know is that this is the woman who has these controversies that ended up happening. And they ended up happening, honestly, towards the final stretch of the race. I keep saying this on Twitter. Netflix is cursed. Every single time they have a top contender like this, they always seem to be tripping as they're getting to the final stretch. And on top of that, the movie she directed is a movie that, hey, look, I love the movie personally. It was my number 10 from last year. But the fact is that one of the reasons the movie didn't end up winning Best Picture is that it's a movie that is very hard for the casual person to get into. It's slow pace. It's a slow burn. You don't really know what it's about to the very end. It's got horrible audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes, which I always tell people, when you get to these industry awards, you want to keep an eye on the Rotten Tomato score for audiences, because this is not critics who are voting. These are the industry voters who are audience members themselves. And I kept saying all year, even though ultimately I ended up predicting Power of the Dog for Best Picture, one of only two things I got wrong. It's a weak front runner because it's not the kind of movie that's going to win on the preferential ballot. And it's just the only reason Campion won, in my opinion, is because, first of all, because she did a great job, but second of all, because she had such an insurmountable lead. I truly believe that had the Oscar season kept going on, even she would have been in trouble like the rest of the movie.
It's such a weird the way they do. Let me just ask you the question then. With Netflix and Amazon and Apple's been very blunt, like, we want an Academy Award. You have these disruptors, but when you go outside the system, isn't this part of the system though? It's like, hey, these are the people that are going outside the system to do it. And then you're trying to get the ultimate inside the system award. This is what's going to happen. And then, I mean, just for a layperson like me who doesn't understand all the ins and outs, I don't know how the ballot works, but I understand how power structures work, and I understand when you're going to be the disruptors, though, sometimes you get people that didn't work within the system for whatever reason. You get people with grudges within the system, and sometimes you get folks that didn't play well with others in the system, and the system's going to fight back a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And on top of that, the thing is that last night we saw history, the first ever streaming service to win Best Picture. Now, here's the thing. I remember a couple of years back when Netflix was trying to get into the Oscar game. I remember there was so much hate towards Netflix within the industry. This is not cinema. This is not how you should win, what you should award Oscars to. But slowly but surely, Netflix got in there, because what Netflix did is they said, we're actually going to get our tours to come in and do movies for us. We're going to buy up movies from film festivals, and we're going to be legitimate contenders. And it got to the point where they just couldn't ignore it any longer. Because when you get to the point where you have our respected directors like Scorsese doing movies for them, you just can't ignore Netflix anymore. And what's happened is that Netflix has been getting there, and they wanted that Best Picture. They want that Best Picture win so bad. They wanted to make history as the first streamer. And then Apple comes in as a multi-billion-dollar monster and says, no, we're going to come in. We're going to start competing for Oscars. And before you know it, it's not Netflix who makes history as the first streamer. It's Apple. And one of the things that I saw from industry insiders is people are not counting in the fact that Apple came in with a multi-billion-dollar campaign. People don't fully grasp how much money these studios put into this awards campaign. At least when politicians spend a ridiculous amount of money on their campaigns, they're trying to get elected into office. These are studios putting up millions of dollars for what is, at the end of the day, just clout. And what happens is that Apple is a multi-billion-dollar company getting into this game. And I think you got to keep an eye on them now, because a lot of people now they're not watching movies like they used to. They're watching them on streaming services more. They're not going to the theater as much. What's successful at the theaters are the big genre films. So these auteurs are going to go to the streaming services to get their movies done and not have to worry about box office. So what ends up happening is that I think you're going to be seeing the streaming services become the new sort of giants in the awards game, because it's much easier to campaign a movie that you could just go on your TV and watch, compared to a movie that you're trying to get through the film festivals, the theatrical window, and all that stuff. So, but the industry might still have a bit of a Netflix bias. They might, and when they see Apple coming out with this cute little movie that warms their heart, it's much easier to go for that once they kind of start turning on a movie. Once they decide, well, you know what, it's not Netflix's year this year. So it's a weird dichotomy because on one hand, you have an industry that's fighting Netflix, but on the other, you have an industry that says, well, we're not going to give you Best Picture. We're going to give it to this streaming service. But that streaming service is a multi-billion-dollar company that knows how to campaign.
Yeah. And as always, it's just the money's getting so out of control, for lack of a better word, even by Hollywood standards. I just don't know I don't think you're going to get that horse back in that barn anytime soon. Luis Mendez, let's finish with this, though. There's been a lot of cry for structural change at the Academy Awards. If nothing else, maybe the seating chart needs to change where you can't just stroll on stage and slap somebody. Do you see they went with the 3 hosts? There's always the debate over the host. There's always the debate over the format. There was a lot of chatter this year about certain categories getting cut from the TV. And do you think after all this, there's going to be some real changes format wise and or behind the scenes structural wise to the Academy for next year's awards?
I honestly think the Academy is still trying to figure out what they're going to be, this new era of more niche audiences, of the fact that people aren't watching TV like they used to. They're still fighting with themselves. The fact that, honestly, if you did a Best Picture lineup among regular folks, it would probably be mostly genre films, blockbuster films that some of their directors seem to have beef against. I think a little bit snobbishly, but it's just the way it is. I think that the Academy is going to have a real conversation with themselves as to why did they present 8 categories before the show to edit it in, and the show ended up being longer than last year's show, which didn't even have clips. And what's it going to take to reach those new audiences? Or, as some film people I've talked to say, just accept how niche they are and maybe go to streaming and accept the fact that they're just never going to get those kind of numbers again. Now, I do think the ratings will go up this year because last year's were so bad. And then there's probably a bunch of people who tuned in towards the end because they started hearing about the Will Smith situation. But I think structurally there's already change in membership. They've added like 3,000 members. But at the same time, we just saw that it's not like a highbrow membership either, because we saw a small, nice, warm movie that, quite frankly, in my opinion, probably won't age well as a Best Picture winner win, just because it ended up being the movie that made a lot of people feel better. But at the same time, it is a more diverse Academy, and we have started to see history. But there is that disconnect with the regular moviegoer at the same time. I think there's gonna be some changes next year, and there's gonna be some changes the other year and the other year. I think you're gonna be seeing for the next couple of years an Academy that's still trying to figure out who they want to be in the future, and it's gonna lead to a lot of crazy stuff. I think you're going to see a lot of changes in how they produce the show, in how they present the show, and until they finally find the right balance and audience that they can live on. And do not be surprised if in a couple years, either the Academy just says, forget it, we're going to finally accept like superhero movies in here. Or if they just decide we're going to be a Hulu thing, since Disney's involved, we're going to be a Hulu thing, and we know that the only people who are really going to tune in are film crazy people like myself.
Yeah, if all the money's on streaming, at some point the streamers are going to be like, hey, how come we just don't have the award ceremony and we'll cut out the bias? I see that coming. Luis Mendez, you do excellent work. Ordinary Times, you have your own Substack, the Mendez Movie Report. Let folks know where they can find you on social media. You also write for ordinary-times.com. You did a lot of write-up for this. You did a great job with it. 21 for 23, man. That's not too shabby. You can go to Vegas and make a little money with that. Let folks know where they can find your writings, your Substack, and your social media going forward, my friend.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm already kind of scouting out next year's Oscar contenders. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or Letterboxd if you're a movie fan, under Mendez Movie RPT. As Andrew mentioned, Mendez Movie Report.substack, where I've just started to write again about movies after, unfortunately, I had to end a podcast that I had going with my brother for 6 months. But yeah, that's basically where you can find me. Just search Mendez Movie Report.
Yeah, great guy. He's been with us at Ordinary Times for a couple of years now, doing good work. Good dude. Make sure you're following him, support him on social media, and support that Substack. Great stuff. Thank you, sir. Next time somebody slaps somebody at the Academy Awards, we'll have you back.
Okay. Well, hopefully that not next year, if that's what it takes.
Well, they've got to have Chris Rock as the host next year, right? That's like locked in now, right?
I mean, what I can guarantee you right now, there will at least be some sort of joke next year about the situation.
They've got to have, maybe they can have Ricky Gervais come out and slap Chris Rock again or something like that. Thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
No problem.